The first time I saw her, she wasn't standing in my driveway. She was sitting on my front steps like she'd been waiting for hours, a canvas bag clutched between her knees, mascara streaked down her face in the afternoon heat. She didn't look surprised when I pulled up. She looked relieved. That should have been my first warning. My name is Silas Mercer. I'm 31, and I've been living in this converted lighthouse on the Oregon coast for almost 6 years now. It's not a farm. It's barely habitable by most people's standards. Stone walls, circular rooms, a keeper's cottage I turned into a workshop. I restore old boats for collectors mostly. Good money, solitary work. The kind of life you choose when you're done with people expecting things from you. My brother drowned here when I was 23. Riptide pulled him under while I was inside grabbing towels. By the time I got back to the beach, he was gone. I found his body 3 days later, washed up against the rocks. Some people leave places like that. I stayed. Built a life around the guilt. The nearest town, Anchor Point, is 15 miles south. A fatting fishing village where the young people leave and the old people wait. They know me as the hermit in the lighthouse. The strange Mercer boy who talks to ghosts and doesn't come to town unless he needs supplies. They're not entirely wrong. That Tuesday started with fog so thick I couldn't see the ocean from my window. I was sanding down a 1950s Chris Craft in the workshop when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. The woman on the other end sounded exhausted, desperate. She said her name was Dr. Vivian Cross and that she worked for a private rehabilitation facility in Portland. She had a patient, Iris Bellamy, 27, who'd completed her program but had nowhere safe to go. Her family had requested she be placed somewhere isolated, somewhere she couldn't cause problems. She asked if I'd consider housing her for 6 months, paid position. I told her I wasn't running a halfway house. She paused, then said something that made my skin prickle. Mr. Mercer, if you refuse, we'll have to release her back to her family, and I don't think she'll survive that. I hung up, went back to sanding, tried to forget the catch in the doctor's voice. 4 hours later, I heard tires on gravel. A white van pulled up, clinical and cold against the gray landscape. The driver stepped out first, a nurse in scrubs, then the back door slid open. Iris emerged slowly like someone stepping into ice water, dark auburn hair falling past her shoulders, green eyes that took in everything and revealed nothing. She wore jeans and a hoodie that swallowed her frame. No makeup, no jewelry, nothing that suggested where she'd come from or who she'd been. Dr. Cross stepped out last. She was younger than I'd imagined, maybe 40, with worry lines etched deep. She approached me while Iris stood frozen by the van. I appreciate this more than you know, she said quietly. And I need you to understand something. Iris isn't violent, she's not a danger to you, but she's been through things most people can't imagine. I looked past her at Iris, who was staring at the lighthouse like it was a mirage. What kind of things? Dr. Cross hesitated. The kind that make a person disappear into themselves. The kind that make them forget how to trust anyone, including themselves. That's when Iris spoke for the first time. Her voice was softer than I expected, almost musical. If you're going to talk about me like I'm not here, I'd rather just leave. She wasn't being rude, just honest. I told Dr. Cross I'd take her, but that Iris could leave any time she wanted. This wasn't a prison. The van drove away, and suddenly it was just us. 2 strangers standing in the fog. I showed her the keeper's cottage. Small bedroom, bathroom, a kitchen area with a hot plate. She set her bag down carefully like it might break. Why did you say yes? She asked suddenly. I considered lying. Instead, I told her the truth. Because I know what it's like when nobody believes you deserve a second chance. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. That night, I cooked dinner. Simple pasta, garlic bread. She ate mechanically, like food was just fuel. When she finished, she looked at me across the table. They told you I was in rehabilitation, didn't they? Yes. Did they tell you why? No, she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Good, let's keep it that way. The next morning, I woke to find her already awake, sitting on the rocks watching the sunrise. I brought her coffee, and when our fingers touched on the mug, she held on for just a moment longer than necessary. We sat in silence, shoulders barely touching, sharing warmth against the morning cold. Eventually, I asked if she wanted to help me with the boat. She agreed. I expected her to be clumsy, uncertain. Instead, her hands moved with surprising precision, graceful and sure. She understood tools, understood how things fit together. When I asked where she'd learned, she said her father had been an engineer. Past tense. The sadness in her voice made me want to hold her. We fell into a rhythm over the following days. She worked alongside me, and I found myself watching her more than the work. The way she bit her lip when concentrating, how she tucked her hair behind her ear with the back of her hand when it was covered in varnish. She was methodical, patient, better at detail work than I was. In the evenings, we'd walk the beach, collecting sea glass and driftwood. She'd slip her hand into mine without asking, like it belonged there. We'd talk about art and music and books, our voices soft beneath the sound of waves. Sometimes she'd stop walking just to look at the sunset, and I'd watch her face instead of the sky, thinking she was more beautiful than any view I'd ever seen. She never talked about her past, never about her family. I didn't push. I just held her hand tighter. One afternoon, about 3 weeks in, a package arrived. Heavy box, no return address. Iris went pale when she saw it. I asked if she wanted me to open it. She shook her head, carried it inside. An hour later, I heard crying from the cottage. I knocked, no answer. I opened the door to find her sitting on the floor surrounded by photographs, family pictures, her as a child, smiling, normal, her as a teenager with a boy who looked like her twin brother, her at a wedding, beautiful in a bridesmaid dress. She looked up at me with red eyes. They want me to remember who I used to be. They think if they remind me enough, I'll come back. Do you want to go back? I can't, her voice broke. I can't ever go back. That's when she told me the first piece of the truth. The boy in the photographs was her twin, Jasper. 2 years ago, they'd been in a car accident. She was driving. He died. Her family blamed her. Not openly, but in every look, every silence, every conversation that stopped when she entered the room. She'd started having blackouts, panic attacks. They'd sent her to the facility to get better. But what they really wanted was for her to disappear. I sat beside her on the floor. You don't have to be who you were. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and for the first time since she'd arrived, I felt her relax. The calls started a week later. Her mother, her father, lawyers. They wanted updates on her progress. They wanted proof she was healing properly. They hinted that if she wasn't improving, they'd have to make other arrangements. Iris started having nightmares. I'd hear her screaming in the cottage, would find her sitting outside at 3 a.m., shaking. One night she told me about the blackouts, how she'd lose hours, sometimes days, how she'd wake up in places she didn't remember going, doing things she didn't remember doing. What if I hurt someone? She whispered. What if I'm actually dangerous and I just don't know it? I took her hands. You're not dangerous, you're traumatized, there's a difference. But I saw the doubt in her eyes. Then on a gray Saturday morning, everything shattered. A man showed up at the lighthouse. Expensive suit, calculated smile. He introduced himself as Graham Bellamy, Iris's father. Iris wasn't in the cottage. She'd gone for a morning walk on the beach. Graham stood in my workshop, looking around with barely concealed disgust. I appreciate you taking care of my daughter, he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. But it's time for her to come home. We've arranged a long-term care facility, very exclusive. She'll be safe there. Safe or silenced? Graham's smile vanished. You don't know anything about my family or what we've been through. I know you sent your daughter to a stranger because you couldn't stand to look at her. His jaw tightened. She killed my son. She doesn't deserve freedom. She deserves consequences. That's when I heard it, a sound from above. I looked up at the lighthouse tower. Iris was standing at the top, outside the railing on the narrow ledge. My blood turned to ice. Graham saw her and his face went white. I ran, took the spiral stairs 3 at a time, my heart hammering. When I reached the top, I stepped out slowly, hands raised. Iris, please come back inside. She didn't look at me. She was staring out at the ocean, tears streaming down her face. I remember now, she said quietly. Remember everything. Okay, that's okay, just come back and we can talk about it. The accident wasn't an accident, Silas. My breath caught. She turned to look at me then, and her eyes were clear, lucid, more present than I'd ever seen them. Jasper grabbed the wheel. We were arguing. He was drunk, angry. He yanked the wheel and we went off the road. I tried to stop him. I tried so hard, but everyone believed him. The golden boy, the one who could do no wrong, even dying, he blamed me. And I let them believe it because I thought I deserved it. Below, I could hear Graham shouting, but I kept my eyes on Iris. You don't deserve this. You deserve to live. Do I? I've spent 2 years disappearing, letting them erase me. Maybe they're right. They're not right, and you know what? I need you to stay. She blinked, surprised. Why? Because you're the first person in 6 years who's made this place feel less like a tomb. Because you understand boats and bad jokes and why some people need the ocean to breathe. Because I'm falling in love with you, and I'd really like the chance to tell you that when we're not on a fucking ledge. She laughed then, broken and real, and took my hand. I pulled her back over the railing and held her while she sobbed. Downstairs, Graham was calling the police. threatening legal action. But when the sheriff arrived and heard Iris's story, heard about the photographs and the blackouts and the coercion, his expression hardened. We filed a restraining order that afternoon. Dr. Cross drove down to testify about the psychological abuse. The blackouts, she explained, were dissociative episodes caused by trauma and guilt. Not violence, not danger, just a mind trying desperately to protect itself. Graham left threatening lawsuits, threatening consequences, but the truth was already out. Jasper's toxicology report from the accident, witness statements that had been buried, a pattern of control the Bellamy family had wielded for years. 3 months later, Iris stood in the workshop, covered in wood dust, laughing at something I'd said. The boat was nearly finished. So was she, in a way, not fixed, not erased, just healing? That evening, I found her sitting on the rocks, watching the sunset. I sat beside her and she leaned into me. "I think I want to stay," she said. "Not because I have nowhere else to go, because this is where I choose to be." I kissed her temple. "Good, because I was going to ask you to." We married in autumn under the lighthouse beam, with Dr. Cross and the sheriff as witnesses. Iris wore a blue dress the color of the ocean. When she smiled at me, I saw no ghosts in her eyes, just futures. Now, some evenings, we sit on the rocks and watch the waves. The keeper's cottage became a studio where she paints. The lighthouse that held my grief became the home that held our hope. She wasn't sent here to be cured. She was sent here to be forgotten. Instead, she stayed with me. And together, we built something neither of us knew we needed. A life where the truth finally set us both free.